Hi, how are you? I'm going to talk to you today about real-world games, particularly games that know where you live and how you live. So Sarah mentioned, my name's Kati London. I'm Vice President and Senior Producer at Area Code, a company here in New York, where we've been making real-world games for over the past 5 years. So those look like a lot of different things. Some of those games turn cities into game boards. Some of those games actually use location information and sensors from sharks in the Great Barrier Reef to affect an online game where you're a marine biologist, essentially playing tag with real-world sharks. Some of those games use geolocation data. Others exist on Facebook, and others exist on the iPhone and Android applications. But I want to talk about how games engage players. So they do this in a whole different set of ways. There's some companies who are great at engaging players casually over interstitial time, right? We recognize games on Facebook, social games. Other games are really focused on engaging players in extended deep play. This might live on consoles or PCs. But players are individuals. They're human beings just like you and me. And while their game experience may take them along a trajectory of casual play to immersive play, or from a lighthearted emotional experience to a heart-wrenching emotional experience, outside of the game, there's this individual. And where and how the game fits into the rest of the player's life is really important. In fact, it's key when you're talking about real-world games. Because in real-world games, people are the platform, right? It's about not capturing deep or casual engagement, per se. It's not about a Facebook game or a mobile game. It's about meeting players, meeting individuals where they are along the spectrum of their life, on their terms. So players are a spectrum, and that spectrum spans across time, location, culture, socioeconomic status, politics, health. All these things come into play when you're talking about real-world games. So I want to talk about a few of them. A player's perspective is a spectrum, and how can you change that with a game? Well, device-aided augmented reality can change a player's perspective in real time by shifting their visual experience of their situated, geolocated experience, right? Likewise, you can augment and change a person's social reality through something like a mayor badge, right? A mayorship in Foursquare. How does it, becoming a mayor changes my relationship both to the people in that space that I'm in and the space itself? And players' location and social economies are also spectrums. So games drive participation and engagement through collaboration and competition, but also through reputation. And certain real-world game companies are kind of pulling or pushing people along that trajectory. Kind of using socially driven consumer tie-ins to funnel behavior. And the last one I wanted to give as an example is how players' time is a spectrum. As many different kinds of human beings there are on the planet, there are that many different types of games that are being developed currently or out there, right? And so we're being pulled by different game companies towards social games or games on consoles or games on our phone that are situated in the real world. But beyond the sandbox of those individual games is an individual person who has a spectrum of experience that spans across the localities of those individual games, across when they're driving to work, when they're at home with their family. And thinking about how a real-world game relates to that larger experience of that human being is really important. So I want to talk today about hyperlocal design approach to real-world gaming. This is about looking at the individual and thinking about how the gameplay can span the spectrums of an individual's experience and follow the players through their experience, not just limit them within the game. So I'm going to talk about two recent examples that I've been a part of. The first one is Code of Everend. This is a massively multiplayer online game that was commissioned by the United Kingdom government to reinforce proper road safety for children. And what's interesting about it is that it's seeking to affect children's behavior through an online experience, but affect their behavior in the real world. So we really need to be able to live in those different localities. And when they came to us, when the government came to us, what they knew about this demographic, this highest at-risk citizen in the UK, is that they know and they're familiar with MMOs. So it's a social, familiar place for them, just as it is walking on the street is a social, familiar place for them. And what they wanted us to do was not describe the rules of proper road safety, because kids already knew that. They could, in fact, parrot back to you the rules of proper road safety. So we weren't going to make a video or an advertisement that was like these singing hedgehogs that already existed. We wanted to create a game that embodied the experience of proper road safety through play. And so this is what Code of Everend looks like for players. And in fact, the core loop of the game is the mechanic is about reinforcing the physical relationship to road safety behavior. So instead of slaying dragons in this game, you're engaging your core opponents by looking right and assessing the danger, looking left and assessing the danger, and then responding accordingly to be able to manage that danger. And just like in the real world, where a child is faced with making decisions about how to navigate through their cities or their communities, in Everend, players need to learn how to do route planning to get from point A to point B in quests and assess the danger there. And the monsters, the aesthetics of the game itself, are actually driven by real-world vehicles, so the actual stuff and matter of the streets. And the monster's behavior is driven by UK traffic data. So we're also pulling in data about how traffic is behaving in the real world to affect the monster's behavior and the danger levels based on time of day and day of week. So that's Code of Everend, and I think we had to make some serious decisions in that game, like, do we situate the game on the city streets? That would certainly make it an easy way for players to segue from connecting the game experience to road safety. But what we also had to weigh were the trade-offs in terms of their actual short-term and long-term safety. And we ended up with this. Now, behavior change is a very difficult thing to be able to measure. And so not only are we capturing a ton of metrics in the game, but we're working on a longitudinal study to kind of evaluate this in the long term, what the impacts are. And in less than the year that the game has been up and running, there's been over 17 years of gameplay logged by kids in the UK, and they've successfully and safely completed over 3.2 million crossings in the game, which is exciting. The last project I want to talk to you about is generously supported by the Knight Foundation, and this is a game that this is a project that Area Code's doing, designing hyperlocal games for American cities that deal with issues as far-ranging as socioeconomic segregation and disaster preparedness. So the first of these games is launching on October 10th. It's called Makin Money, and it is designed for a 3-zip code area in Macon, Georgia. And the game itself is really designed to bring local people together, face-to-face, connecting them to one another and to local businesses using a local currency. So when we went in to do some research in that community, what we found is that it was pretty segregated along socioeconomic lines. And what we wanted to do was provide a game that would bridge and bring people across those different communities through gameplay. So I have a quick video that I want to show you that just walks you through this game very quickly. So as you can see, Makin Money is a pretty simple game. It's using very simple rule set that we're hoping is going to produce some really interesting emergent behaviors in the players. And what we're trying to do is we were trying to really find the lowest common denominator to give as broad a spectrum of the population access to this game, so that whether you have internet or not, you can access it, and whether you feel comfortable reaching out of your social circles or not, there's enough momentum and enough kind of ritual around the experience to get you going there. So basically, in the game, players spend or increase their social currency to generate a local currency. They have to make these bonds. And the local currency is the shared pivot point between disconnected communities that they can use in stores and with friends. So I think in both Makin Money and in Code of Everend, what we're really hoping to do is look at how games that take a hyperlocal approach can impact behavior and different communities across both inside the game and beyond the game, and see what we can find. So we're looking forward. We have longitudinal studies on both of these projects, as well as the following project, which is a game to deal with disaster preparedness in the Gulf Coast region. And I guess my final thought that I would leave you with today is that as game designers, as game developers, and culture creators, we can think about working with where players are already, working with the mediums and the spaces where they are, or we can think about how that maps to and relates to the rest of their lives. And I think that that's an encouraging and interesting challenge to take on. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Katie.